Good morning, all. Today we are going to see chapter 5, that is unit 3, functional dependency and normalization for relational databases. Under this chapter, we'll see three different topics today: relational model constraints, types of keys, and also database design. So I'll just brief you about all these topics. So we'll see first the types of relational model constraints. So first one is domain. So as you all know what is domain. So domain refers to a set of possible values for each attributes which associated with an entity set. So domain is nothing but the name which is given for the table, what we have given for the table, that entire set of values, and the name what we have given, it is called as a domain. And the next one we are going to see about key constraint. So a key constraint is a statement that a certain minimal subset of a field of a relation is an unique identification for a tuple. So we have discussed earlier about what is key. So there are different kinds of keys, so that we discuss later. So first we'll see what is this key constraints all about. So key constraint means, so each type of keys will be having a different rule set. So key is nothing but which is very unique identification, we call it as a key constraint. Next one, integrity. So integrity constraint is nothing but the condition specified on a database schema and relative data that can be restricted in an instance of a database. So when we are applying some simplification rules, so that is what we call it as an integrity constraint. So the simplification rule what we are applying for the table will restrict the data that can be in which is instant in the database. And the next one, entity, which you all know what is an entity. Entity is nothing but a real world object. So the entity integrity constraint means it's a number of primary key value cannot be a null one. So the primary key what you have mentioned in the entity table, so we can't leave it blank. So if you leave blank, so for example in the register number column, if you are leaving the register number column blank, so we can't even identify the related data. So the entity table always the primary key has to be filled. You can't leave it as a null. And the next one, the last type of the relational model constraint is nothing but referential constraint. So the referential integrity constraint specified between two relations is used maintain the consistency among tuple in the two relations. So the referential, so we have experienced this referential key in the lab. So when we are referring to the previous table, we call it as a referential key. So if anything goes wrong in that, so you will get the error saying that there is a inconsistency in the key. Next one, so these are the 5 types of relational model constraints. So next what we are going to see about this, so these are all the rules, so basic rules what we apply to the table. And next we are going to see the types of the keys. So in the types of the keys, there are 5 types basically: simple key, super key, candidate key, primary key, and foreign key. So simple key is it is not going to help in any way, but it is a key, you can find it. So if I'm in a table, there are a few names, so the names will be having the first name, last name. So based on that we collect the data. So that one we call it as a simple key. So the example is name. Next one, super key. So super key is nothing but, so when you were very particular, so the name might be repeated but address won't be the same for the same names, correct? So that we call it as a super key. So simple key is nothing but, simple key contains a single attribute, so only single attribute. So if it is a first name, only one first name will be there. You can't make 2 different first names or 2 different last names. Next one is like super key. So super key is nothing but an attribute or a combination of an attribute or a combination of an attribute that is used to identify the records uniquely is known as super key. So for example, so that is what we said as a name and address. So this combination, so always you can relate with one more key, one more column. So name and the address, so you can find the data easily. So we call it as a super key. And the candidate key, it's same example, name and address you can find, but we can't tell that is only the unique one. So candidate key can't be a primary key. So you can find exact data, but it is not that clear. So candidate key is an attribute or a combination of attribute that identifies the record uniquely but not of its proper subset. So example is name along with that address. So the two different, same might be repeated, but address won't be the same for both the names. So that we call it as a candidate key. Next one, primary key. So primary key you all know, which is very unique, and to find out the single row record, that is tuple or a record, we call it as a primary key. So example, register number. Next one, foreign key. So foreign key, the last type. A foreign key is an attribute or a combination of attribute in one base table that points to the candidate key of another table is called foreign key. So this foreign key is nothing but a reference of a unique key from the different table. So you will be referring the register number from the previous one and you will relate it to the current table. So that we call it as a foreign key. So these are the basic key types. Next, we are going to see about database design. So there are two different designs, so very basic. So one is from the top to the bottom. So top to bottom, we call it as a top-down design, and bottom to up, we call it as a bottom-up design. So top-down design is a method starts from the general and moves to the specific, means like how you solve the problem. So like from the top you will solve, and you simplify, you will get one answer. So that kind of thing we call it as a top down model. And bottom up model is nothing but it begins with the specific details and then moves up to the general. So this will start from the general to the specific, and this will be from the specific to the general. So these are the three different topics what